How many little buffs is Ryze actually going to get? If history's any indicator, I'm gonna get a little scared over here. What is up, Team ProGuides? Christoph here to give you guys another patch rundown. In this video, I'm going to be walking through every change that hit Summoner's Rift on patch 10.13. We finally got nerfs to Conqueror and Death's Dance, as well as some unexpected balance changes coming up as well. They're buffing AP Nunu, nerfing Guardian right after they just buffed it. Well, there's a lot to cover, so make sure you stay tuned. By the way, I want to let you guys know that we're doing a giveaway for 7 annual ProGuides subscriptions and a ton of points. To have a chance at winning this prize, all you need to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel and head over to our giveaways section in our Discord. This is all to thank you guys for our 700,000 subscribers coming up. All it takes to enter is just a few clicks and you're set. Speaking of which, for our question of the day, which League of Legends character most resembles your body type? No body shaming here, guys. My body type is long and thin and lanky, so I am somewhat like a Twisted Fate, but on a bad day, I am sadly more like Ivern. Let me know which League of Legends character most resembles your body type. I'm pretty excited to see these answers, to be honest. Alright, but before we talk about the balance changes, let's talk about the new cosmetics. Yes, we've got 5 new skins dedicated to the beginning of summer. The Pool Party skins. We covered this in our upcoming changes video, but if you missed that, it's Heimerdinger, Jarvan, Orianna, Syndra, and Talia. I love all these skins so much. They're really well made. I encourage you guys to go check them out. Without being covered, let's get into the balance changes. The first part we're going to cover is the 3 changes to systems, 2 runes, and an item. Beginning with the runes, let's start with Guardian. This keystone was buffed last patch, but it proved to be a little bit too strong as a result, so its shield values have been reduced from 80 to 200 to 70 to 150. Unfortunately, the bonus movement speed isn't coming back. However, the quality of life changes Guardian received make it much easier to use than before. A lot of champions were finding success with this keystone, and our analysts believe it's still a good choice. However, that doesn't mean that we can take these nerfs lightly. Support players definitely aren't happy about these changes, as numerically this keystone is weaker than it was previously, and it has lost its bonus movement speed. It'll definitely have to take some getting used to, but at the very least, it still functions more effectively than before. Another keystone receiving a nerf is a big one. This is the controversial Conqueror change. Conqueror is a staple on so many different champions, so this is going to mix up things a lot. A ton of players have found this rune to be quite troublesome, and Riot has finally decided to act, but only because the wrong champions were utilizing it. The stack cap has been increased from 10 to 12, but at the same time, you're going to receive less adaptive force with each stack. So you'll receive less adaptive force, going down from 2 to 5 to 1.7 to 4.2. When you have maximum stacks, Conqueror should be roughly just as strong. The biggest reason this change was needed was because Conqueror was designed for bruisers who thrive in longer extended trades. Marksmen and even AD assassins were taking advantage of the ridiculous amounts of adaptive force Conqueror provides, and thus Riot has finally decided enough is enough. Conqueror needs a nerf, but it still needs to be a viable pick on bruisers, as it's essentially the only decent keystone most of them can use. Finally, Death's Dance has been nerfed. However, this nerf is exclusively for ranged champions. Ranged champions now only store 10% of the damage they take. That's 10% less than the previous 20%. Champions like Ezreal and Aphelios were reaping the benefits of this item that was actually reworked to suit bruisers instead. Feels like anytime marksmen start abusing anything, it's gotta get nerfed. Poor bot laners. Death's Dance's plethora of stats makes it an appealing purchase, especially for squishy champions that want a little bit of extra survivability without giving up damage. With that being said, let's run into our champion balance changes by running you guys through the top lane first. Kicking things off, we have Ornn. Ornn has been a complete monster in pro play recently, and it looks like the balance team want to tone down his strength in the highest levels of play. For patch 10.13, Ornn's passive will be nerfed quite significantly. The health and mana items you build in the field will now retain its previous health and mana percentages, but it'll return to full force once you go back to base. This change is mainly targeted at his safety during the early game laning phase, so he can't constantly stay relevant after being poked out. Our analysts are predicting that these nerfs will be quite big, and Ornn will be dropped down to the B tier because of them. Gnar, on the other hand, has gotten yet another buff. Once again, it's to his E though. Gnar's E's bonus attack speed has gone up from 20 to 60% to 40 to 60%, and the duration is increased by 1 second. With 20% more attack speed, Gnar is going to be much stronger in his mini Gnar form. This is the ability that most Gnar players max last anyways, so buffing its level 1 strength is a buff for pretty much half the game. Like always, buffing his E rewards Gnar players for knowing when to sacrifice their escape tool to instead make aggressive plays to begin snowballing games. While these types of plays can easily backfire and lose them to lane, it's essentially high risk, high reward. Our analysts do believe that this is it though. This is the Gnar buff that will end it all. Bold statement, but they've moved him up into the A tier as a result of this one. He's received so many buffs and they haven't really yielded any results. However, if you were to compile all of them from this season as well as during the preseason, it'd make for a pretty hefty list. One last buff is to my main man, the character who I wish represented my body type, Yorick. His R's leash range has been reduced from 900 to 600. Yes, this is a buff. This buff makes it easier for Yorick players to control the Maiden of the Mist. A lot of the time, Yorick players find that their Maiden decided to stick around and randomly run it down instead of following his lead. This has happened to me a million times as a Yorick player. I hated it, and this is actually pretty exciting. I'm quite excited for this nerf buff. Whatever you want to call it. I agree with Riot on this change. Touching his damage is pretty scary as it could potentially make him way too OP. Instead, they've created more room for skill expression by manipulating Yorick's ultimate. For now, he'll remain in the B tier, but make sure to stay tuned for our mid-patch update to see if this actually changes his tier. Alright, so now let's run it through our S plus and S tier for the top lane. In our S plus tier, we have Darius, Fiora, Wukong, Maokai, and Garen. In spite of ghost buffs, Garen players are still choosing to run Ignite for the extra damage. Nimbus Cloak seems to suffice, and that makes a lot of sense. Garen already gains some movement speed from his Q, and more important than catching an opponent is making sure you can kill them, right? On the other hand, Darius players are definitely enjoying the buff Summoner Ghost received. Although his win rate dropped a bit last patch, our analysts don't think he got any weaker. Instead, this can be attributed to the fact that his ban rate went up. It ended last patch just below 49%, meaning that even if Darius players wanted to play him, he wasn't available to them half the time. Instead, it's likely that Darius only made it through drafts when enemy top laners had favorable matchups paired for him. And our S tier consists of Mordekaiser, Kled, Jax, Urgot, Nasus, Singed, and Volibear. Volibear and Syndra players have gotten the hang of him. Good news is he's not nearly as broken as other champions upon release, such as Set. However, he's still destroying his opponents on Summoner's Rift as players have finally figured out what they're doing with him. Volibear's incredible turret diving pressure and strong laning have led to his win rate climbing significantly, landing a little bit lower than 51%, a massive improvement from his 42% win rate just a patch before. His win rate will only continue to climb as we give players more time to grow accustomed to him. Alright, now we have a new member to the list, and that is going to be Syndra. She's been an absolute nightmare in the top lane. We have a video covering this pick, and I want you guys to make sure you check it out. Our team put a lot of effort into it. I think you guys will benefit from it. Go check it out right here. Although Conqueror received massive changes, our analysts believe that the majority of top laners aren't going to have issues adapting to the nerfs. Certain champions, such as Aatrox and Alawi, however, will remain on our watch list, and we'll update you guys next week. They might end up hitting harder than intended, and we want to keep you guys in the loop in case they do. Alright guys, that concludes the top lane section. Let's run it through the jungle. Just as a reminder guys, if you are interested in climbing in League of Legends, make sure to go to ProGuides.com and consider learning jungle. I've been using it to climb a lot recently. Even though jungle is not as strong as it was in previous seasons, it's such a good way to climb in solo queue. You have so much influence on the map, and if you have great macro game but pretty bad micro like myself, I would highly recommend jungle. And if you're new to that role, go to ProGuides.com and get the resources you need to effectively play that role. It is a little bit daunting in the beginning, but it is well worth it. Alright, so kicking off the jungle, we've got a buff to Nocturne. This one is intended to only help him out in the jungle though, instead of his mid lane. Inevitably, Nocturne will be stronger across all roles though, but at least it won't be by much outside of the jungle. Nocturne's passive now provides double reduction when he hits monsters, just like it does when he attacks champions. This is going to massively speed up his clear times and also keep him healthier during his jungle clears. For now, however, Nocturne is staying in the B tier. He hasn't performed so well in the jungle, and this buff probably won't be enough to push him into the A tier. Next in the jungle is yet another buff, this time to Vi. Her Q's cooldown has been reduced from 12 to 8 seconds to 12 to 6 seconds. This means that with 40% cooldown reduction, her maxed Q will have a 3.6 second cooldown. With less than 4 seconds in between each Q, she's going to pack a real punch when trying to hunt down backliners, and it'll be a lot harder to shrug off the pressure she applies. While 40% cooldown reduction might not be the norm at the moment, I'm sure that somebody will find a way to make it possible. Trinity Force, Warrior, and Death's Dance, for example, would easily allow Vi players to max out their cooldown reduction. This buff is pretty significant, so she's been moved up to our A tier as a result. Alright, last jungle buff for this patch, I promise. That one is going to be to Nunu. But this buff is a little out of the ordinary because it's aimed at buffing AP Nunu. Nunu was already finding a ton of success, so even if this buff is only intended to help out AP Nunu, I'm sure it'll help out all Nunu players to an extent. Even if tank Nunu players don't want to opt into insane glass cannon builds, building some hybrid items like a Liandry's Torment can allow them to rack up some more damage with relative ease. His Q's damage AP ratio has been increased from 0.5 to 0.65, while his healing AP ratio went from 0.7 to 0.9. His R shield also received an AP ratio set at 1.5 this patch. AP Nunu will have more access to tankiness as a result of these buffs, and even tank Nunu players might want to consider picking up a little bit of AP on him right now. As he was an S tier pick already, he will comfortably remain there until we reevaluate him next week. In terms of other shifts, our analysts have moved Sylas down a tier. They believe that the Conqueror nerfs will hit him a lot harder than other champions. Stacking up Conqueror is a pretty big deal for Sylas. He wants to cast his W after he maxes out his Conqueror stacks, but this can be a little bit harder for him as he doesn't attack as quickly as many other champions. Thus, Sylas is now going to be, sadly, in the C tier. Our Jungle S Plus tier consists of Fiddlesticks as he continues his spooky reign of terror throughout the forest, as well as Summoner's Rift. In the S tier, we have Lee Sin, Olaf, Rek'Sai, Shaco, Nunu, Elise, Warwick, Kayn, Evelynn, Nidalee, Wukong, Zac, Graves, and Volibear. Wow, we have a ton of S tier champions in the jungle. Also in the jungle, Volibear has been performing exceptionally well. His win rate has soared last patch, peaking at 52%, actually 10% higher than it was the patch before. This guy went from 0 to hero, and all it took was some time and a few buffs to help him out. The higher jungle win rate is likely attributable to the fact that as a jungler, he's able to impact any lane with his ultimate. No lane is safe, and applying pressure across the entire map makes for better use of his ultimate than simply trying to solo dive lane opponents. Alright guys, that's it for the jungle, so let's talk about mid lane next. We have a pretty decent number of mid lane changes we need to talk about, so let's start with Cassiopeia. So this one is basically a little band-aid fix for a big oopsie that Riot made last patch. While attempting to nerf Cassiopeia, they buffed her MR a little bit too much. In spite of losing base health, her win rate as a mid laner actually went up because guess what? 4 base MR is actually kind of a big deal. Seems a little strange, but the stats don't lie. This patch, her base MR has been reduced from 34 to 32, and it should make it so that she doesn't end up so much stronger than where she began. Although Conqueror got nerfed, Cassiopeia is definitely not one of those champions who will be affected severely by that change. She spams her E so quickly that requiring one extra cast will very rarely ever be the deciding factor in fights. In spite of this nerf, Cassiopeia will remain in our S plus tier. While losing 2 MR is still a nerf, it's not really the biggest one, especially considering that Cass can attempt to play passively, free farm, and hard carry later into games anyway. So do you think that 4 increase MR was a huge reason why she's such a strong champion right now? This is up for debate. Will reducing her MR by 2 solve this problem? I'm not sure. You guys can start this conversation in the comments because I know a lot of Riot friends of mine are reading them. The next mid lane nerf we're covering is to Syndra. Her Q's mana cost has gone from 40 to 80 to 60 to 80. Her Q now costs 20 more mana than before early into the game, and this is actually a pretty significant change. Players will now be punished much harder for missing Qs, but this means that it's objectively harder for Syndra to push waves than before. It costs more mana to do so, and as a champion that typically likes to find solo kills and snowball off leads, this sort of change is a big buzzkill. While her damage hasn't been touched, she's going to lose a decent amount of lane pressure in response to this nerf. She's been too reliable of a pick, especially in high elo. As a result, Riot has once again hit her with the nerf hammer. Our analysts have moved her down to the B tier as they foresee this nerf hitting her win rate pretty hard. Alright, now we can start talking about buffs in the mid lane. First on that list is 2 Ryze. His MR has gone up from 34 to 36, and his base attack damage from 56 to 58.7. Like with previous Ryze buffs, Riot is taking it slow, like really slow. Like Nathan does with prospective girlfriends, as you should be respectful. Ryze is the epitome of the timeless issue known as strong and competitive, weak in solo queue. By taking it slow and working gradually, Riot is hoping to slowly fine-tune Ryze so that he's at an appropriate power level for all players, not just the pros. Somewhere out there on the Balance team is fighting for you, fighting for me, and the entire player base. Now, if they'd only nerf Yuumi, I believe that there are definitely heroes over there too. By increasing his MR and AD, Ryze is going to be a little bit easier to play. Our analysts believe that this especially helps out lower elo players getting into the groove of playing Ryze. More AD means easier last hits, while more MR means that surviving will be an easier task than before. He'll sit in the B tier for now. These buffs are rather minor, and we don't expect to see any major changes in his statistics. Following up on those AP Nunu buffs, we have buffs to AP Kog'Maw. His Q's AP ratio has been increased from 0.5 to 0.7, while his R's has gone from 0.25 to 0.35. AP Kog'Maw has slowly disappeared from the mid lane, and Riot is pushing for his return. These buffs are actually pretty massive. However, one of the abilities that was buffed is only a single target one. The ultimate buff, however, is pretty huge. Kog'Maw's ultimate damage scales with his opponent's missing health, so even a 0.1 AP ratio buff can mean a lot. Take into consideration that AP Kog'Maw is an artillery mage, and this buff means even more. With very little information to work off of, our analysts will monitor him as this patch plays out and give you guys a placement next week in our mid-patch update. While our mid lane tier list remains relatively the same, we do want to let you guys know who is in our S+ and S tier champions. In our S+ tier, we still have Fizz. God, when is he going to get out of the S+ tier? Riot, please do something about Fizz. In lower elo, he's not wreaking havoc, but he's very strong. We also have Vladimir, Cassiopeia, and Talon. The Conqueror nerfs should hurt Talon a bit, but it shouldn't be hard for Talon players to slowly transition back to utilizing Electrocute. In fact, we might even see players still use Conqueror because of how high Talon's AD ratios are. In our S tier, we have Kassadin, Katarina, Echo, Diana, Zed, Silas, Galio, Annie, and our newest member, Nocturne. We mentioned those Nocturne jungle buffs earlier, but he should be able to counter jungle or even farm his own jungle between waves much more effectively with this buff he just received. That concludes our mid lane tier list, so let's hop down into the bot lane. Alright, starting the bot lane changes is a nerf. Aphelios' base attack damage growth has been decreased from 2.2 to 2. By level 18, this means that he'll have almost 4 less attack damage than before. Next, his Crescendo will no longer refresh Chakram stacks on epic monsters, and his R's crit bonus has gone down from 50% to 20%. Essentially, we've got a big nerf with some small ones to accompany it. Factor in the Death Stance nerfs, and you've got a marksman that's been absolutely gutted. We're moving Aphelios down to the B tier in response to these nerfs. Also, as a reminder, if anyone is interested in playing ADC this season, we do have amazing resources, including a doublelift course that we released to help you master ADC. Yet another nerf in the bot lane is aimed at Kalista. Her AD per level has been reduced from 4 to 3.5. The fact that Kalista deals 90% damage means that this nerf hits even harder than it looks. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Kalista's passive has a penalty portion to it. She gets to jump between every auto attack, but for that much power, she needs to pay a price. Essentially, Riot likes that Kalista is a lane bully, but believes players should be rewarded more heavily for surviving Kalista's early game onslaught. She won't scale as well, and if you manage to stall the game out against her, it should be a little bit easier to secure victory. Kalista isn't moving, and we'll be seeing her in the C tier for now. Finally, a bottom lane buff. Lucian's Q laser range has been increased from 900 to 1000. This doesn't mean his cast range has gone up. You still have to get up close and personal if you want to cast this ability. Instead, this means that you'll be able to snipe opponents through other targets using Lucian's Q, whether it's queuing a minion to tag an opponent during the laning phase or using an enemy champion as a target to hit one behind them. Lucian players now have a little bit more to work with. Like the Yorick buff, Riot is adding more skill expression rather than directly increasing Lucian's damage output. While this buff isn't enough to push Lucian up into the next tier, it's a nice buff, especially for Lucian mains or players who are serious about improving with him. He'll stay in the B tier for now. In our bottom lane S+ tier, we have Ezreal and Kai'Sa yet again. They look like they're here to stay, and this is taking into consideration the Death Dance nerfs as well. Ezreal doesn't need it in order to find success, as he's already a safe champion. He also still has Iceborne Gauntlet to help protect himself, so this nerf won't hit him as hard as Aphelios, for example. Following them in the S tier, we have Vayne, Caitlyn, Jinx, Draven, Misfortune, and Jhin. Our analysts believe that Draven players should be able to make a smooth transition from Conqueror to press the attack. But once again, this is a point that our analysts will definitely follow up on in our mid-patch update next week. Make sure to subscribe so that you can receive a notification when the video is released. Finally, let's wrap things up with support. Okay, hold up, I guess there is a hero in the balance team because they've finally done it. They've nerfed Yuumi! Woo! If you guys saw our upcoming changes video, you probably already know about this, but Yuumi's E has received a massive nerf. Rather than costing 100 to 160 mana, it'll now cost 40 to 60 plus 15% of Yuumi's maximum mana. This is a huge chunk of mana for a spell, especially considering that Yuumi holds 2 charges of it at once. Throwing 30% of your mana out the window for a single spell is already a pretty big deal, but then you've also got the base mana cost to deal with as well. Yuumi players are going to have to take more risks hopping off to activate her passive so that they don't run out of mana. This also means that in extremely long team fights, Yuumi won't be able to spam heals like she used to. Instead, Yuumi players will have to be thoughtful about who they're healing and when to cast them. With the magnitude of this nerf, we've moved Yuumi down to the top of A tier for now. In contrast, Rakan is receiving a minor buff. This is likely to compensate for the Guardian nerfs this patch. Rakan's W's damage has been increased from 70 to 270 to 70 to 290. This is a relatively minor buff, but it should definitely give him some more mid to late game power. His W is his primary ability, and buffing it is probably one of the most impactful ways to make him stronger. Since Guardian also got nerfed, Rakan's power level should remain around the same, and he'll remain an A tier pick this patch. Our S+ tier for supports now consist of Blitzcrank, Soraka, Senna, Lulu, and Bard. Following them in the S tier are Thresh, Nautilus, Morgana, Nami, Janna, and Leona. Bard continues to dominate Summoner's Rift with his incredible lane pressure as well as his utility. Bard is kind of weird. He wins lane and also scales pretty well because of how much agency he has over games. In a way, he fills both an enchanter and tank support role in the sense that he can do both of their jobs kind of well. Bard's ultimate is an excellent hard engage tool as well as an ability that can save his allies. The same applies for his portal. He can either use it to lead the charge or instead use it to create an escape pathway for his friends. Alright guys, that's going to conclude our patch rundown tier list for patch 10.13. Thank you guys again for watching. If you are interested in other types of content for other games like Valorant, Smash Bros, TFT, go check our other channels out because we're making a ton of great content for you there. And if you're interested in watching some amazing live streamed classes on educational content for whatever video game you like, go to ProGuides.com and join one of our many incredible instructors on there in their live classes. That's it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck in your next few games, and I'll see you on the Rift.